To have in studio with us, Vinny Perth. How are things, Vinny?
Good morning. How are you? Oh, good.
Just looking off the referee from the Legia to talk.
We were talking the Legia Warsaw game. So Johnny was
he actually has
bemoaning the handball rule earlier. What are your views here?
Yeah, it's funny. I'm still not over that decision, and it's little things like that when you come out of the game, because that was, and who knows? But we were 1-0 down, I think, at the time, and then that decision sort of shifted the whole tide to Legia. Remember, that was a playoff for group stage Champions League football in Aviva Stadium, and then we went over there and we took the lead. Sensational Robbie Benson goal, and then they had a man sent off, but that goal was pivotal in the tie, and Andy Ball's hands were actually, I'm on radio here,
on
but
the ground,
it couldn't be any more behind his body, and but again, it's funny when you watch the game back and you listen to people in studio, it was a debatable decision. That's where some of this stuff is so
grey area.
It wasn't debatable from our perspective, or a lot of people. Andy Boyle.
That's not debatable.
But there was people in studio that night who said, it was a handball. So
If you want to fall backwards on the ground, what are you going to do? Put your hands up in the air? I mean, like, people, you have to realise that your hands move in a football game.
Yeah, and very seldom, as you know, do I agree with you. Where I'll agree with you on this stuff is...
We've another 20 minutes here, like.
Any time to disagree.
When the problem I have with VAR is, I think it's been a real help in different situations, but referees should not be allowed to see anything in slow motion. Right? Because I've no problem with the two handballs being given or not given last night, if that happens on the pitch. But when you slow stuff, nothing happens in slow motion.
What if a player deceives very quickly? Then the slow motion is necessary to determine if that's happened.
Yeah, but the whole point of it, the football game doesn't happen in slow motion. So in terms of offsides, it's very clear. Someone's either offside, and we don't like how close it's getting, but it's black and white. If he had an armpit offside and he can score a goal with that armpit, he's offside. So that's black and white, no issue with that. Takes a little bit longer than we would like, but other stuff is just played in real time, and that's it. And you shouldn't be allowed to see stuff in slow motion. I'm just completely against that part of it, because the game's played at speed, and trust the referees a little bit.
The other conversation we had earlier was that the League of Ireland has become cool, I think, Johnny, is that the phrase we're going with? I mean, it's hard to argue that there are people now going to League of Ireland matches, as Johnny said, that you would never have seen going to League of Ireland matches.
Yeah, and I think it's a mixture of that. I think some clubs have done it really well. There's a niche around balls. There's also a certain niche around St. Pat's in terms of people going. But somewhere like out in Tala, the job the Shamrock Rovers has done, that's not necessarily about being cool. That's about something in the area for people who genuine, like, Tala should be a real hotbed of soccer. Never mind Shamrock Rovers element. We should be able to develop football after football out of that area. And even if you think about Richard Dunn, Killen-Arden, Robbie Keane, Feder Kern, the Irish international manager is, to give you people listening from around the country, was born within a mile of Tallaght Stadium. Stephen Bradley, the league champ, the current league winning manager, was born within a mile of that stadium, and the under-21 manager Jim Crawford was born within a mile of that stadium. You had Richard Dunn. There's so many good players. So, but it's about and if that, I believe, and the FAI have done a lot of work in that area, but that should be, places like that should be hotbeds for our soccer, and it's starting to happen. Not there yet, but when you go to what I love about going to a Rovers game is the fact they get lots of stick helps me. I like that. But when you're walking, you see people coming out of, again,
you get much stick at the Rovers games.
Yeah, still a little bit. It's great though. It's good fun. It was too far the other way, but now it's just good fun. But you see people coming out of, and again, I understand people listening won't know these areas, coming out of Kilnard and Jobstown, Springfield, Tymon North, and you see them walking the game, parents and kids.
Like the old days.
For me, that's huge. Like, I used to get on a bus down to Harold's Cross to watch Pats, for argument's sake, or get a lift over to Richmond Park, and when I see people walking, and that's real. That's how England is so good at what they do, because the stadiums are in towns a lot of the time. You go to Goodison, you're walking in, particularly if you stand on the Gladys Street, and you could have a cup of tea like within 20 yards of putting your ticket through a turnstile in someone's house. So I think that's hugely important. But it at the same time, they're small enough numbers in terms of, like, Drogheda is selling out now, but it's small enough in terms of capacity. So we have to sort of we can't take these people are turning for granted. And I go back to a couple of weeks ago, the heavens opened up in Dublin. People travel from Derry City.
That's
the best fans in the world. I'm telling you, they're brilliant in terms of how they sing. And if I'm going to a Derry game, I'll sit near them for the bit of crack and listen to them. But they stood out in the rain for,
and I mean
after
rain,
3.5 hours, stood out in the rain for another 2 hours and then sent back up to Derry. So we've got to look after these people and don't take them for granted.
That's the thing, and the stats came out this week. So attendances for Premier Division games up by 27% in the opening 9 games of the season. That will come as no surprise to anyone. More than 55,000 as well have attended First Division games so far this year, with the average attendance going up again. But that's the issue, that this money needs to be invested in the facilities.
And go back to, say, Leinster Rugby, who are, you know, one of the top rugby teams in Europe. Their attendances weren't always as high as, you know, you can sell out the Aviva in the next couple of weeks, but you could quite easily get a ticket for what's the stadium? RDS. And then all of a sudden it takes off. So momentum will come, and I think the League of Ireland is ready to take off to go to another level. Just make sure we have to have some of the facilities in place. And when you watch Rovers and Shells the other night, for me, I've watched a lot of Shells this year. And when I watched that game, you're looking at, some people are going, Shelbourne are a really good footballing team. Well, of course, they're technically very good, but they're playing on a really good stadium, a really good pitch, and people go on about TV coverage and all that stuff. Just get the basics right. Football pitches first, and this country aren't good enough yet. And then the rest and the stands and the whole lot. And the whole lot will come together, and we're slowly getting there.
That game as well, Vinny, like, and the producer in the studio who's looking after the cameras, he pans to the sideline, and there you have like Joey O'Brien and Damien Duff.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
These are in their infancy in terms of management.
On TV.
This is a big deal for them. This is everything to them at the moment. These are Premier League players, and they're managing Shells, where essentially a mid-ranking League of Ireland team. Yeah, and we take that for granted almost.
Yeah, we do a little bit, but at the same time, that just adds to the what's the word, the box officeness of a Damien Duff. Like, I mean, Rovers or Shelbourne are the live game again this week. You know, are they following Damien? I don't know.
It might be a little bit, yeah.
But look, there's some big names in the league as well. Outside of that, that's all that just helps to it. It brings it, lets people know. But it shouldn't be any shock to people that someone like Damien and Joey are really invested in their football club, because you don't get to the level they're at by doing football half-arsed. And anyone that knows Damien, and I only know him through doing a course with him over a 2-year period, he is the most touring man in the world. As I said on here before, I think he debates with himself if he's going for a bottle of milk which brand to get, and he'll make sure he gets the right one, because... But you don't get to
that from him.
But you don't become a Premiership. You don't get to the level he got to without being so invested in what you do.
Just a question for you, Vinny. So, like Stephen Kenny would have spoken about, he was detached from the Jack Charlton kind of Ireland team because of the way we played, and that's kind of controversial in hindsight, because like Jack Charlton did a lot of things that were quite revolutionary at the time in terms of pressing and stuff like that. But we didn't play a nice standard of football. And if you look back at, say, I spoke to somebody last weekend who was at Ireland and the USSR in '74, which is Liam Brady's debut, and we passed the ball on a bad Dalymount pitch like a really good team that day, Johnny Giles and Liam Brady. And I was watching that game during lockdown, and it was one of these games that they played back, and I was like, how are we then pigeonholed as this country that couldn't play football, right? But if you go to the League of Ireland, where is this kind of hegemony come now, where everyone is trying to pass the ball, give or take? It's a real on the ground league. And if you go, I think, Vinny, to underage as well, they're all coaching to pass the ball from the goalkeeper out at under 14 level, at like Longford Town all the way up to Shamrock Rovers.
Yeah,
where does that come from?
I think two things. I think the game has changed in terms of how it's played and how people watch the game, and people understand the game a little bit different in terms of, it used to be 4-4-2. I debated this many times with someone like Stephen. I don't subscribe to that argument that someone like Jack Charlton, I think Jack Charlton pretended he forgot people's names and stuff like that. I think that suits the after dinner speaking as well a little bit. But go back to, I'll just bring up one goal real quickly. Go back to Ireland against Italy I think it was in the Joint Stadium. John Sheridan came and got the ball off Dennis Irwin. Short. Jack changed John Sheridan's position a little bit and he became a little bit deeper. Okay, he went long to an Andy Townsend or to a...
Tommy Coyne.
Yeah, but remember where Ray Houghton was playing? He was playing on the right wing. He was playing narrow. That's something a lot of players and Pep is doing now with, say, Grealish playing narrow or Foden. And Houghton is in that sort of number 10 position to pick up seconds. That didn't just happen by accident. That didn't just like, Ray Houghton ended up in that position. So
remember John Sheridan hitting the bar in the second half?
Yeah.
Lovely move.
And the way we played there, Andy Townsend actually switched position and sort of, because he went into he gave us real running power from 10. Just to make the point that football is changing and it has different cycles, and I think to go on about, say, someone like Jack Charlton, I think is completely disrespectful because he got to major tournaments and he did.
But we were pigeonholed as a country that couldn't really play football. It was like this British style of football. No. Like when Dundalk went into Europe, there was genuine surprise when you played Maccabi Haifa that day. And I think you were quoted after the game, where you may have spoken to Benny Yoon or whatever. He's like, I love the way you play. Like, you played the game the right way. But this was an outlier. It was like, oh my God, you're an Irish team. Not only that, you're a League of Ireland team and you're passing the ball here. Yeah. And it took us a long time to prove we could actually do this. Like.
No, but British football was played a certain way, and continental football was played another way. I think they've all merged into being very similar now, and there's different variants of it of all different shapes. But I just think I think that was overplayed from both sides a little bit. I think they were closer than what they should be. Italian football was very sterile and whatever, and wasn't about conceding, where British football was a bit more blood and thunder. I think we've also got to be careful of where we are now in the league in terms of there's some games at the moment that aren't good. And it's too much actually passing, and it's too slow, and it's passing for the sake of passing, and teams need to be a bit more adventurous. And then there's a lot of goals being scored, and you could argue because defensively teams aren't good enough as well. So it's about finding that balance. And while teams aren't being caught out at the moment because the league is so close, the gap isn't big enough because we haven't got really outstanding teams potentially. So you've got to find a balance in all that, and I think. Not go overboard one way or the other way, I would feel.
Vinny, the AstroTurf argument has come up once again this week. Colin Healy was quoted talking about the number of injuries, and certainly last week on Sunday, Andy Boyle in the warm-up, Greg Sloggett during the game at Oriel Park suffering injuries, Stephen O'Donnell linking the number of injuries both Dundalk and Derry City have suffered to those Astro surfaces. So this is an issue that's not going away.
Yeah, again, I like to think I like to be on the fence or in the middle on this stuff. So I obviously worked in Oriel Park for nearly 9 years. So a couple of things. I was really surprised by Stephen O'Donnell's comments. Right, not that I disagree with them, I just wouldn't have said them. Because
as the Dundalk manager, because straight away, if I'm a Shelbourne player today and want to take the next step, which is say Dundalk and proper full time, maybe it's not, but Shelbourne's a bad example. I ain't signing for Dundalk. I'm not signing for Dundalk because there's a higher risk of being injured if I can find a comparable club, and I think that's part of Dundalk's problem now, because you've got teams now like Pats full time, Bowles full time. So a Bowles player now has a better option. He's probably training on grass and playing on grass. So
that's a big call. I agree with you, but is he trying to force their hand and say we need to change the pitch here?
Yeah, but
is he playing a gamble?
But unless the club has somewhere in the region of, and just to be clear, somewhere in the region of £700,000 to change the pitch back to grass. People think you just rip up this and plant seed. There's a certain structure underneath the AstroTurf that has to be removed, and then when do you do it? The Dundalk play in Drogheda because you can't do it in the off season because it's winter
takes
here.
Too long. Yeah,
so it's a huge call, and but there is an issue there. Absolutely, I seen one article this week in the Sun, really good article, but it was sort of critical. Neil O'Riordan's piece was sort of critical of previous owners, but actually people who put down this pitch were the ones before that who were back involved with the club. And they saved something like £25,000 at the time by not putting what's called a bounce mat in. Yeah. And it's really hard underneath. I think the elephant in the room is AstroTurf pitches aren't bad. They're needed in this country to help develop our footballers because of the climate, because of the restrictions on the amount of land we have for people to play football. But the two at League of Ireland level are two of the worst ones you'll find in the bloody country. So there's some really good AstroTurf pitches around the country. You go and play in European football, you'll probably play, if Rovers get to a group stage Europa League, I would say highly likely statistically play against someone on AstroTurf pitch. The Rovers players won't come home from that saying pitch was terrible, it was dangerous, any of that stuff. The ones that are in our grounds in Derry and Dundalk are really
in
poor.
Ireland then, actually.
There's lots of them, like in just local level where people have put proper money into them. As I said, there's it, and I'm not an expert on AstroTurf pitches, but I know from, like, I brought people in at Dundalk to try and again encourage our owners to remove our AstroTurf, and by putting the proper structure in, and the maintenance of them is huge. Like Malahide United's pitch at the moment, they've got two of them. They're excellent. Cherry Orchard had put one in. There's examples.
They just regressed though, Vinny, do you know?
Of course you do.
Yeah.
It's a product that wears out over time, and but again, maintenance is huge on them, and like, but the injuries, Shane, is really scary. Like, it's something that people have to get a grip of, because it's.
Well, we were making the point during the week, Vinny. Sorry, like, where are injuries now in terms of bad tackles versus players just getting injured on Astro?
Yeah.
Innocuous challenges.
Yeah, like John Mountney had done his cruciate, ironically, playing for Pats in Oriel Park. He then done his other cruciate, playing for Dundalk. Young Keane from Shelbourne had a really bad knee injury there and still hasn't played. Sligo lost two players, Brannock and O'Sullivan, to ankle injuries.
And a player underage the following day.
Up in
Brandywell.
The Brandywell. I remember going to the Brandywell when we came out of Europe, so it was mid enough season. I lost Patrick McElhenney, to a tackle, but his foot got planted on the AstroTurf pitch. Dave McMillan went up for a header. Michael Duffy and Daniel Kelly lost 4 players that day, and it was off the back of a big run, and 3 of them never played for me again, and we only lost it in Europe by 3 points that year. So it can be really detrimental to people if it's not well maintained and looked after. There's some of them up the north where players will tell you they're excellent.
I think they're 4 in the. But did you know the mad thing is, like, Terryland Park, which is, like, as you will know, Vinny, an excellent surface for years and years and years. And talking to Noel Connolly, one of the best groundsmen I'd say in the world, not to mind the country, what he's kept. He said there were over 40 games in 1 month in May, and even Noel Connolly, which was so sacrilegious, was saying we have to consider going down Astro. If Terryland went down Astro, I don't think it'll ever happen, thankfully, after the debate we're having now. But it would be the saddest thing, because that beautiful pitch in the west of Ireland, just another Astro pitch, which is going to regress. And I hope, whatever Vinny says about the cost, I hope we don't have any more of them in the League of Ireland anyway, whatever happens in Brandywell and Oriel.
Yes, certainly the injury statistics are a concern. We should mention, lads, the fixtures. Tomorrow night, 4 games in all. Cork City take on Derry at Turner's Cross. It's Drogheda versus Bows at Weavers Park. Shelbourne playing Dundalk at Tolka, and St Pat's against Shamrock Rovers is probably the big game at Richmond. And then, of course, Saturday evening we have Sligo Rovers against UCD. Anything particularly taking your eye?
Every week we have a good game.
Yeah, I think at the moment, you've got there's not a lot of focus. Like, for whatever reasons, not a lot of focus on Shamrock Rovers. They've played 10 games and won 3. That's only a 30% win rate. Right?
They won those 3 of their last 4, like, so they were all of a sudden. It's mad. You can look at it 2 ways. Like, Pats are second, and Pats are having a terrible season. It's mad. Like,
I wish you had been thinking that way back in 2019. The point I make is, to be clear, the point I make is, it's a big game for them. I think they need to kick on and win. I still believe Rovers will win the league by 10 points plus.
Really?
Jack leaves.
And even if Jack Bourne leaves, there's talk of Jack Bourne going to MLS. There's a couple of bids in.
2 bids, Charlotte is one of them. Leave?
I don't know is the honest answer. I know he's out contracted at the end of the year, so all of this stuff nowadays, is there anyone playing games or whatever? We'll find out, because their window shuts this weekend, I think. So we'll find out in the next 3 or 4 days. But he's been sensational. He's back to his very best. Rovers are far and away the best team in the league.
Do you think that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I don't think...
Even Derry at the rest.
The problem is Derry have a couple of injuries, so we're not seeing the real Derry at the moment, but every team will get injuries. The difference is if Rovers get injuries, they'll still be exceptional. So, but it's a big game for them. They need to... It's all right being playing... They're playing excellent. They're playing really well. But they need to kick on, and I think this is a big test for them, and a big test for Pats as well, who've been...
Well, Shell showed how to marshal Gaffney and Burke, close them down and just give them no space.
The other thing for me was Jack Moylan had Jack Moylan had the Rovers defence in ribbons at times. He really did, and that was the one thing I think that'll encourage Pats, because at least Pats are going in, and I think they do seem to be a good counter-attacking team, Vinny, as well, which they might have to do even at home.
I think there's a template for Pats how to beat Rovers.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, again, I'm talking up Rovers. I'm just saying this is a big test for them. You cannot win a league by only winning 3 out of 10. Statistic having a 30% win rate.
Yeah.
So I'm saying this is a big test for them. But there's a big template now. Pats play similar way to how Shells play, and the front two of Pats I think will cause them problems in terms of Rovers on the counter attack.
We were speaking about why the League of Ireland is cool or whatever. Adam Murphy, who I think started in Dalymount, he's a kid, I think he's 18. Everyone's been raving about him at Pats. He's had desperate injury problems, and I imagine he might start Friday, which will be fascinating, because I love seeing these young players coming through, and we've had so many good young players in central positions being entrusted with the role at Bows and Pats and places like that, and I hope Adam gets, because this will be massive playing against Shamrock Rovers, who are by a street the best midfield in the league at the moment.
8:50 AM on OTB AM. John Duggan's also in studio with us. Morning, John.
Morning, everybody. How are you all doing?
Keeping well. The League of Ireland is cool. That's the main subject line this morning. Has the League of Ireland got cool?
I think it's
cool.
Got a lot of interest from younger people, and I think there's definitely huge growth potential in it. I think the facilities, obviously, we know are substandard, so I think they need to improve. And if you could get better facilities, you could get more people to games, you could get more of a buzz around it. I do think another thing that's important for the league is to know who the players are, because for many years, I don't think people, the general public, have had a connection with certain players or know who they are. They'd know maybe the top 5 to 10, but they wouldn't know beyond that. And I think that's probably the biggest thing for the league to try and pursue, is that marketing knowledge of who these players are, the connection with their communities, so they're as known as Gaelic footballers and hurlers. That's the biggest challenge, I think, for the League of Ireland going forward. There's the infrastructure side, but there's also the connection with the clubs, and there's a lot of transfer, revolving door around players. So I do think that's the biggest thing for
JD's points about young players or young fans, that's massive. Vinny's on about these kids from Joestown, Killinarden. You look at when they pan behind the goal at Rovers game, they're all youngsters, all young kids, as Vinny says, from the area around. Absolutely massive social media.
Well, these clubs have TikTok.
And TikTok. United have over 50,000 TikTok followers.
Yeah. I think it's whether they're doing it or not, I think it's really important for the FAI to get like the likes of Chidozie Benny to go to Limerick and to go to Cork, where he played. I got that right, haven't I?
Yeah.
So for Seamus Coleman to like, part of your deal as an Irish player, part of your kind of, and the lads would do it anyways, to go to Sligo and or to have like a couple of sessions a year, or to meet the community, or have
Gavin Bazun is always a Rovers game.
Have an open day or whatever, and that kind of connection. I think is really important for anybody who came from the league who's now playing across the water. Whereas Georgie Kelly scored this week for Rotherham, so Georgie Kelly was back to Bows, and that is, I think, is really important. I think the identification, you got to identify with like we all talk in our sleep about it, like all the golfers, all the Premier League players, all the Gaelic footballers. If you were talking about Dublin Mayo, you'd probably be able to name most of the players on both teams. Can your person on the street name the Shamrock Rovers and Derry teams 1 to 11?
Well, that's the women's football team. You couldn't name any players, and all of a sudden they're on the side of buses and they're on billboards.
Yeah, I think SSC Electricity needs to do more. But like the Irish team that played France, Vinny, 5 of them came from the League of Ireland.
Yeah,
started.
I think John's point's well made. The only thing I will say to you is locally a lot of that's going on. So if Pat Hoban went into, and he does, and have been with it, you talk about David Clifford. People say David Clifford walks in and there's a video of people just reacted to David Clifford. I'd love to share with, and we put it on social media, some. Pat Hoban walked onto a training ground and one of these, the summer camps.
Oh yeah.
And every player, I brought the player down, he was mauled, and he was late coming into it, as in he was 5 minutes behind everyone else, and kids come from everywhere. So I think that's happening locally. I think it needs to happen nationally to then take it to the next level.
Yeah.
Like Dundalk or Bows are going to the local schools, and the kids are getting connection. Rovers do it, I know, up in Tala as well, in the local school. They even brought the league trophy to the school, and my son was disgusted, like sitting there going, this is, what's he bringing the trophy for? He stole it on me dad, But it is happening. But nationally is the next step, and I think the FAI have certainly got League of Ireland on their mindset, to be fair to them.
A big sea change there.
But it needs to go to another level, and absolutely.
You could make a good point as well. Could you name a Longford footballer or a Wexford hurler? So maybe I'm talking about the top level of Gaelic footballers. So you could maybe make this argument that the League of Ireland club is comparable to maybe a lower ranked GA team in the Championship this weekend. How many Westmeath hurlers can the casual person name? But most casual people could be able to name the top 20 hurlers, the top 20 footballers. And that's where the League of Ireland, okay, Jack Byrne aside, or the success stories, like would we have known Chidozie Benny before he went to the UK?
Yeah.
So that would be my observation on it.
It's so multicultural as well, like, different colours of skin at every club at all levels. I love that. I love the fact that the League of Ireland is a mirror to society now, and football is still the working class game for me, and I love that, going to games where I can relate to the people. It's 15 quid in, whatever it is, it hasn't gone up in years, and you go to a game, and I will say this time and time again, per head of population, some of our crowds, the likes of Dundalk and Sligo, for these small regional towns, are up there with anywhere in the world. Really, really good, and we shouldn't be down ourselves as much as we are.
Yeah, 100%. All heading in the right direction, for sure. John, this morning, any other news?
What else would you like to talk about?
What's happening? What are the main things this morning? I guess the Champions League has kind of been hidden.
The Champions League, I think the thing with City is, would they do anything silly last night? They didn't. That's the thing. So once Haaland scored, it was all over. As intense as it was for maybe about an hour against Bayern Munich, I think the issue with City in the last years of the Champions League has been doing stupid things and conceding goals in quick succession. That didn't happen last night. Real Madrid, the interesting thing about it is their second leg is at home on Wednesday the 16th of May, the first leg in the Bernabeu on the 9th of May against Real Madrid. Inter AC will be a fascinating semi-final, obviously a Milan derby.
Ash on City, John, is this the best City squad they've ever had?
I think it's comparable to the last few years, Vinny, but what all these things is, do they have any injuries at the moment? They don't, but I think the key thing is Haaland. And maybe Shane Keegan was in here the other day, talking about, well, they haven't scored more goals, they haven't done this. But if you look at Haaland, is scored 48 goals this season, and I just think that he's a special sauce. And also,
so the reason I ask you is, on Haaland's a good point. Just you take all the centre halves they have at the moment, and he's managed them brilliantly. I don't think he had that strength before, but Haaland is the best example of it. He only has one way of playing now, because he has to play Haaland, so he has to play a 9. So you think now he's not going to mess around with this. We know he has messed around and done different things. So whether it's Grealish or Mahrez or whatever, I just think the Haaland thing is huge, because it's forcing his hand almost to go, I need to play with a 9, I can't play with a false 9. Because he's turned up in Champions League games, finals, and done crazy things.
Well, maybe Haaland has given them that little bit of security. And Pep keeps on making the argument at press conference as well, other clubs have had to get used to the Champions League. And I remember it did take United, say, in the 90s quite a few years to get their head around the Champions League. He's making that point about Napoli this season. And maybe he does have a point around that. It's also a way of hiding, as you say, the madness of not playing Rodri, a holding midfielder, in the game against Chelsea in the Champions League final. So maybe having Haaland there as a focal point.
Will they bottle it, though? Will they bottle it again? And
I don't think so. I don't think so.
This is the year they just have to get it done.
Yes.
Is that capacity? If Sané had gotten the first goal last night, is there potential for City to think, here we go again?
I don't feel it this season. I think City might be peaking a bit later than they would have had in previous seasons. So once again, they're behind Arsenal in the league. I think they might have been peaking a lot earlier in campaigns before this season. And with all these things, it's the maturity of. But if you got somebody that is a machine and up front, it means that, remember, the last few years, I asked Nathan, for example, who's the best player in the Premier League you see in the flesh, and he go, Phil Foden. Yeah. Phil Foden hasn't been talked about in the last few months.
Yeah.
I know he's had an appendix out and that kind of thing, but that just shows how big it is. And there is a depth there. Calvin Phillips hasn't even landed at Manchester City. So I do think Stones has had a really good season, a really revitalised season.
I just delighted for John Stones. I remember having an argument with someone about 4 years ago. He could be one of the great centre-halves of all time of English football. And when you think of it, he's actually lost in the middle of that City team, because if you think of it, if you were English centre-halves, look at his trophy haul, look what he will end up with, and he plays in a lot of the top games. I just think he's
they have options.
But they've options, and I just hope and to call Johnny up once more. Sorry, Johnny.
You can't go back to 2019 again.
No, but is losing to Real Madrid really bottling it? Like, you're talking about the highest level of football.
I think they threw it away last year.
Yeah, maybe not bottling it.
So got to go here.
They could lose in a way.
Here all day.
They could lose a very tight semi-final. which wouldn't be battling it. But I think a bit like Leinster in the rugby, they have to win it.
Yeah, okay.
Because with Guardiola, he's had too many.
Great analogy, Leinster.
They
Monaco,
probably will.
Spurs, Lyon. These were all matches they should not have.
And I hope it happens.
Two semi-finals are going to be classics regardless. But lads, 8:59. John, thanks a million as always. Vinny, thanks for coming in.